people together because we had the opportunity yesterday to visit the Burlington Processing and Administration Center for ICE, which is down in Massachusetts. And it was important to us because during the operations that went on in Maine, many of the people who were picked up and detained were taken there first for processing. So we had heard numerous stories about the facility, about the conditions at the facility, and we wanted the opportunity to go in there ourselves. As you know, the catch of the day, which was so disgustingly called, really started building up around the middle of January when we all heard word that they were likely to come here, and we'd been watching so carefully what was going on in Minnesota and thinking about how that would impact us. We did end up having a surge into Maine, maybe something around a couple hundred extra ICE officers were in our state and used many of the same practices that we've seen in places like Minnesota, and then within about 5 days they were gone. But the fact that they've left our state and that the surge is over does not mean that ICE operations are over or that CPB isn't still active in our state, or that many of the practices that we saw changing during that time, and I think Mainer's got a unique opportunity to kind of look through the lens of how the administration is now conducting itself on picking up immigrants in our country. Many of those practices continue, and I predict will continue to get worse. So one of the challenges about visiting any of the facilities of the government right now is, even though Congress is a co-equal branch of government, we're required to give them 7 days notice. We gave our proper 7 days notice. We were allowed to attend, visit the facility at 1 o'clock yesterday. But that's nothing like being able to make a surprise visit. So I think the story I could tell you would be very different if we had had the opportunity to walk in there during the height of the surge. Because many of the stories that we heard about directly from detainees, and we have a very detailed affidavit from one of them, were of overcrowded conditions, of too many people packed into a cell, kept there for too long, not enough food or water or ability to contact your lawyer. And what we saw when we went in there yesterday were almost no detainees, almost no one in the facility, relatively clean, stacked of snacks. But there's no escaping this notion that when you walk in there, you're seeing 4 very dark and uncomfortable cells that could never hold what they say is 25 people, and what we had heard was maybe more than 50 per cell. A little stone bench, a few plastic mats, aluminum foil blankets, I guess they're called, but nothing that feels like it would be a warm or comforting blanket. And trying to imagine those days when so many Mainers were packed in there, knowing that this could be the worst day of their life, that they may have already said goodbye to their children for the last time, they may never see their workplace again, and not having any idea where they would be moved next. Most of those detainees, as you know, were picked up for random reasons, not with judicial warrants, often taken out of their cars in front of their workplace, given very little reason for why they were leaving. Sometimes just taken in a van to the Cabela's parking lot, transferred to another van, and then taken to that facility in Burlington. And our understanding is during that time there were upwards of 200 people in there. And this is a facility that it is a stretch to say you could put 100 people in the 4 cells, quote, made for 25 people. As I said, they're small, they're dark, they're dingy. And while we didn't see any of the overcrowding today, while we didn't see any of the things necessarily that were listed on some of the affidavits that were turned into us, that was because we weren't given access during the worst possible times. Now, we all hope that we never see one of these surges again in Maine, or that the Burlington facility is never used. It's not routinely used in Maine. We've toured the Scarborough facility before. That has 3 detention cells, also just used for processing and transfer. And my assumption is if they keep at the rate they're going now, people will continue to be transferred through that facility. So it wasn't exactly what we would have been able to see were we given that opportunity. And I want to be clear, Congress has been challenging this restriction on the part of the federal government. We won our first lawsuit, but the only people who are now allowed to go into federal facilities within a short period of time are the 10 or 15 who are named in that suit. So we went back to court last Thursday and are now hoping to expand that so that any of us can go into any federal facility at any time. And just to be 100% clear, we're a co-equal branch of government. it is our job to do oversight and inspection, and none of us can know what goes on in government facilities if we're not allowed to walk in without 7 days' notice. So, okay, so that was a little bit about what we saw. We met with some of the administrators there who actually are the same people who we meet with when we go into the Scarborough facility, because we are part of that overall sort of Boston region. And some things that we have been routinely asking them about were at least discussed. Whether they're fully addressed is not completely clear, but some of the administrative problems that we have were talked about. One of the big challenges that we had during the surge that went on in Maine is that the ICE locator, the ICE detainee locator that we depend on often to track where people are, and family members and employers depend on, was not being updated or used during that period of time. Probably because they were understaffed, possibly because they didn't want us all to know where everyone was going. Now they have assured us that that is up to date and on time, and it is a critical part of what our team uses in order to be able to track where people go. We talked to them a little bit about the conditions and many of the things that we had heard about, both from lawyers and individuals. And again, they showed us a facility that wasn't currently operating under those stressed conditions. It doesn't mean it exonerates them for what it was like when people were jammed into there, but we didn't see it while we were there. We talked about people who were released without adequate clothing, who often are picked up in with whatever they're wearing or dragged out of their car. They showed us shelves of clothing and shoes and said that they would never release anybody without that clothing, yet we have heard multiple times about people being released. So again, I couldn't counter it by what I saw there. One of the biggest complaints that we have had, besides the inhumanity and the overall mission that they're on right now, has been this issue of people not being reunited with their paperwork when they get out of there. So that's been a persistent complaint for us, and our caseworkers are often assisting lawyers and advocates and individuals in trying to return that paperwork. I mean, just imagine being pulled out of your car, pulled out of your house, dragged to this facility, or perhaps, as we have cases, even to more distant facilities, and everything that you were carrying on you because you were told to keep your paperwork with you is then not returned to you when you are released. So one of the worst stories that we worked with, because as you know, this is a processing and administrative center, almost everyone is moved somewhere else unless they're released. We heard a story and worked with a woman who had been taken to Ohio, released without winter clothing, no money, no paperwork, had really literally nothing to be able to like fly on an airplane or come back to Maine. We were able to help with some others to assist her coming back, but that's just a typical story of someone who has nothing when they get out. So even when we have to try to access people's passports, driver's license, work permits afterwards, it may be a long period of time before they're returned, and that means many people actually get back to their home after one of these surprised detainments, and they don't feel they can go back to work or drive a car or certainly travel. So they related to us about process things they're trying to do to make sure that things don't go into the wrong file. They're meant to be kept in a plastic bag, and then the plastic bag returned to people. I mean, these are all kind of nitty-gritty details, but critically important for those people who aren't getting their documentations. We're still moving forward with a piece of legislation that would clarify this, because I don't think this is the only facility where people have had this problem. I've heard this from my colleagues as well. And just because they told us yesterday that they're trying to fix the process and retrain their employees doesn't mean it's done. But I will say it was some affirmation that because of the number of complaints that we've had and the hard work we continue to do, some things perhaps will change. As I said, it's unlikely this facility gets used unless we have another one of these surges, but we are deeply suspicious about what might happen going into the future. And I just want to review a little bit. Well, a lot of people in Maine got an opportunity because of the Operation Catch of the Day to see these horrific stories of a corrections worker pulled out of their car, or a single mom being picked up in her parking lot, or workplaces being raided. It's important for people to understand that during 2025, since this administration, we have seen a steady upward stream of people picked up without judicial warrants and without what we would have thought in the past was a reasonable cause, and picking up people who have legal rights to be in this country. And I think there are 2 or 3 reasons for that going on, and I expect it will continue. I expect it will continue to grow because, as you know, even though the Democrats in the House and the Senate are holding up on the funding for the Homeland Security bill, the big ugly bill, Homeland Security got an extra $170 billion, and they're rapidly spending that money, and much of it is going to increase personnel, ICE officers, and also increase facilities. And that is of deep concern to me. So my expectation, and we got some inclination or reaffirmation of that more personnel are being hired at facilities like the one we saw, and perhaps also in places like Maine. So the increase in amount of money being spent, whether it's on the very gadgets to track the people who were legally following ICE officers while they were here in Maine and found themselves with an ICE officer showing up at their house because they'd used some kind of tracking device to figure out who they are, or increased money that is now being spent on proposed detention centers to increase the number of beds. We see the fight going on in southern New Hampshire. Hope one doesn't come right now to Maine, but there are a lot of for-profit operations that are trying to expand their detention facilities, which means holding more people. But most importantly, this administration is using every possible way they can turn and twist the law to change the procedures that have been used for a very long time. So this is where it gets a little trickier for me to explain, but if you have detailed questions, I have this amazingly smart team that tries to figure this out every day for individuals in our state. But things that we used to call legally entering the country. You came on under the app that was designed by the Biden administration, you filled in your blank, you were waiting for your asylum hearing in a court, you're waiting for your court date, which might be 2007, 2008, but then you were suddenly picked up for overstaying your visa. And they use that as a reason not to just pick you up and say you're overstaying your visa, but to move you through one of these processing centers and then take you to Louisiana or Texas, or where they will now keep you detained until your court date comes up. We've heard many stories in those places of horrendous conditions and conditions that appear to be meant to drive people to want to leave the country or to give up on their court date or their green card application. And we think they're using all new strategies now just to get more and more people out of this country. So some of it is through how they reinterpret the law. Some of it is through these overuse of ICE officers and their quotas, and we believe fully that there were quotas in the state, and that's why they were picking up so many people, just trying to get them into these facilities so they could say they met their numbers, but then hoping somewhere along the way, the person loses their paperwork, they get sent to a detention center, they give up on their claim, or they are somehow caught in the system and can't come back. So for the number of times that people say, I'm all for immigration, I just want people to come legally into this country, we are talking about huge numbers of people who believe they are here legally, who are legally working with work permits, who are legally waiting for their asylum date or a green card application or many other reasons that they have traditionally been here, and now finding the rug pulled out from under their feet. So I do not want anyone to think that this is changing. I think it's going to continue to get dramatically worse. I think that's the reason that there is an impetus now to build so many more detention centers. And from my part, in terms of what we will be doing to continue to follow up, we'll start working on an opportunity to go visit one of the detention centers, not one of the processing centers as Burlington was, in Louisiana or Texas, or one of the places where many Mainers are now being taken, so that we can see them in those places where they're being held, find out their ability to access lawyers or do some of the processes and procedures that would allow them to come home. But a lot of what we're fighting against now is an administration that has now decided to reinterpret these laws that were widely used. You've heard these stories many times about people going in to do their routine check-in. Those are the check-ins that you do in Scarborough or you do in Burlington, but now being told when they go in there, oh, thanks for checking in the same way you've been doing for the last 7 years, but we've decided now we're going to put you in a detention center. And that is one of the reasons that people are living under so much fear. One other thing I wanted to talk briefly about, because it's just so, it's going to have a critical impact on what we're doing, and something we also see in the office every day, is the number of people whose work permits are now being, are unable to renew their work permits. So we talk about this a lot, about how many people are legally working in our state, how important they are to their employers. You heard from many employers during the surge that was going on, that people were afraid to come into work. And for some places, some places that do food processing, clothing manufacturing, in the service industry, certainly in our medical industry and hospitals, a lot of people weren't coming into work. Many of those people depend on having their work permits renewed. This system has been changing almost every day. Some of the automatic renewals don't work anymore. Some of the lengthened opportunities to continue your work permit that extended the period of time don't work anymore. And now what we're finding, and these guys see people come into our office every day who say, I need to renew my work permit, and they're having to tell the people from, there are 39 countries overall that are on the no travel, or they're on the travel ban countries, and then there are 17, is that right?
39 on the adjudication pause, but 79 countries.
We got a list for you if you want to see it. Here we go. Yeah, they got it. Yeah, so just let's say you've been living in Maine for a while, you were actually from Eritrea, so you're under a full ban and a visa pause. So perhaps you were working legally here, you come into our office yesterday, you say, I'm not able to renew my work permit, what's going on? And we have to look you in the eye and say, I know you've been working in our state, you're a wonderful person, and we're glad to have your family here, but you no longer can legally work in our state. And we have no recourse, we have no opportunity to do anything else. And this is a very long list, these permits are now running out everywhere, and I know you heard from a lot of people in the Chamber of Commerce and others deeply concerned about this. And for every family member who is here in our state, supporting their family, renting a house, putting their kids in school, this will continue to be a problem. So it's just one more of the multiple assaults going on under the administration that we're living in. And it's gone far beyond thinking, these are just a few changes, they're picking up the worst of the worst, they're only going after the criminals. We certainly saw in Maine that of the over 200 people they've picked up, maybe a dozen had some kind of criminal background. Some of them were already in institutions, in jails. So we know that's not what they're doing, and we're more and more seeing this as just a move to remove people from our country, to take out people who are legally here, legally working, and to create far less diversity in our country. And it will be a huge detriment to Maine, and we just want people to understand that while this surge may be over, this assault on the people of Maine is not over. Questions or solutions for us?
So you had requested specific information about the 206 people picked up in Maine. Have you gotten that information? Can you give us a rundown that 15 were this?
Nope.
Who these people are? Any of that?
Not really. I mean, we've gone through many people and gotten, information here, there, but we do not have, and we did not get from them. And many questions like that we answered them, at that facility they said, oh, that's above our pay grade. And we have certainly written a letter to Christy Nome. We've tried to do that with Senator King as well. So we're trying to access all of that information, but they are, like so many branches of the federal government, unwilling to give us access to that kind of information. So everything that we've garnered, we've done through the experiences that we've had talking to advocates, attorneys, reading it in the newspaper, or working directly with families who've come to us. And we can only just give you a very general idea. I think we could have had a much better sense had we been allowed to go into the facility exactly when those 200 people were there, because we would have had the right to walk through and talk to people who are, Mainers who have been moved there. So that's certainly one of our number one fights, to get rid of this 7-day rule, this ridiculous 7-day rule.
In talking with other members of Congress, are they finding the same pattern where when they show up for their scheduled visit, that it looks very different than what was reported to be before they got there?
Absolutely. Catherine Clark actually tried to go to the facility last week without notice. I don't think there were many people in there then either, but she wasn't even allowed in the facility. So they're still sticking to that. And we've heard that routinely, that now I think it would be different if we get access to Texas or Louisiana, some of the bigger detention centers. We don't have any yet in New England, but we're going to continue to pursue that. Because you can't move that many people out. You could clean it up, you could, give them better blankets that day. I know some of my colleagues who looked at a facility in San Diego were only given access to a few people with criminal backgrounds to try to skew sort of who was in there. But think if we have people who, we have privacy waivers and they have a relationship to Maine, if we can get to the facility we can talk to them direct, where they are, we can talk to them directly.
Do you have a timeline for when you think you might be able to visit one of those detention centers or in the southern states?
Good question. I think we'll try to do it within the month, as soon as we can sort of get some details and figure it out. We've been working closely with the advocates and lawyers just to try to figure out, when we do go to one of those centers, originally we were planning to go to Texas and then realized that many people in Maine have been moved to Louisiana, so we just wanna find the place that we would find the most people.
Just to again, set the scene from what we saw, this is a facility, I think it's in an office park.
Yep.
right? And it's technically a field office, it's not supposed to be a detention
It
facility.
is not a detention center.
But it has been, right, since last year, it has been holding larger numbers of people at times.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that, they acknowledged to us that there were 200 people there, or 200 people had come through during the surge, but if you recall, our surge was only about 5 days long. They claimed that the cells could hold 25 people each. I think we were horrified at the idea that 25 people would have been in a cell about a quarter the size of this room, a third of the size of this room, with nothing but cement floors and a little cement bench. Definitely not set up for any long-term stay, no real facilities to feed anyone, boxes of snacks, bottles of water,
And there are 4 of them? 4 cells?
and a couple of separated cells. So I imagine if someone had to have, the way they described it is someone needed more privacy or someone had to be held in a separated cell. There were maybe 3 or 4 of those.
Where was everybody if nobody was there when you were visiting? So they've all been moved to other places?
I think legally they're required to have people out of there in 48 hours, or is it now 72 hours? Yeah, we don't know, the numbers have changed. Originally no one's supposed to be there more than 24 hours. But these numbers keep moving around and we don't always get notification of it. So, just to reinforce again, yes, people are brought in there, they showed us, the door where people are brought in vans, they come through a, fingerprint check, all the kinds of things that you would do, then they're moved into different cells as they're processed, they go sort of down the line, this cell, this cell, this cell. Women are meant to be kept separated from men, there were just 2 women in there when we walked in and they were separated. And then they're supposed to be out. They talk about it, in sort of their dry technical terms. It's about bed availability, logistics. And so we say, where do you typically move people? And they all say bed availability. I think some are moved into other, into prison facilities in Massachusetts. Didn't some of them go to Plymouth? Yep. But then we've also heard that eventually most people go to the southern facilities. He told us Louisiana at some point had the greatest number of beds for immigrant detention of any state in the country. They told us they can move people faster now than they did before because they have more airplane availability. Clearly not the $70 million airplane that Christina wants to buy, which she said was going to be moved for use for detention, moving detainees. But I think they have a lot of contract here that they move people out.
Out of the 200 that were processed in that facility, and you guys have been working with people, do you have any sense for how many folks have been able to come home to Maine?
2/3? No.
It would be a guess at best. To your point, we can only sort of cobble that together with families who've reached out to us, mostly because their documents are still being held somewhere.
And about how many is that families that you guys are working with?
I could get you a more concrete number after this.
Yeah, we've been working on that. Yeah, at best I would say a half are either back or we know who they are still in detention.
It looks like the Supreme Court has just invalidated the Trump tariffs. What's your initial reaction to that?
Hallelujah! How's that? Really? I gotta get my phone out.
Just came through.
Well, interesting. I believe that, let's see. Many people thought that the Supreme Court would have to take that action, that there was no other legal course. As you know, the president has been trying to say that these were enacted under his emergency powers. And, you know, even the casual observer who doesn't understand how complex tariffs are, add myself to that list, would say that the way he's used tariffs, like you get a tariff, now I'm taking your tariff off, has been arbitrary, punitive, and not necessarily helpful to the economy. President, you know, in the beginning, he pitched tariffs as something about using to bring back the manufacturing economy, and I think that's often been appealing. It's been appealing to us in Maine, who felt that NAFTA really did a lot of damage to many of our manufacturing industries. But then the president has never followed that up with anything to support manufacturing or to try to encourage more of it in our state. So particularly from Maine, where we haven't seen the benefit of increased manufacturing, but we have so many cross-border industries, which we spent a lot of time meeting with the Canadians over, you know, lobsters, blueberries, lumbers, you know, a variety of things. It's just made so many things here more complicated and more difficult, and also impacted our relationship with Canada and even our tourism industry. So I'll have to read the ruling, I'll have to see what the impact will be, but I would be very happy to see the end of the president using this as if it's his own personal tool to either punish other companies, punish other countries, or try to put random money in his pocket to use for whatever he chooses.
Can you talk a little more about your decision not to go to the State of the Union?
It's a really painful event. I mean, I was there last year. I've been to several of Donald Trump's states of the union, and I'm finding increasingly the lack of respect that he has for Congress, for Americans, for our policies. It's just hard to picture sitting in a room for that length of time and being somewhat of a captive audience to the president. You know, I was asked to participate in an alternative rally, which would give me and many of my other colleagues an opportunity to talk about the things that we think should be discussed in the State of the Union and what should be, you know, in front of our minds at this moment in time. So it seems like a good alternative. You know, some people like the idea of standing up and protesting during the president's speech, and I, for one, am one that feels like we can do our protesting here and, you know, State of the Union there.
Regarding the 7-day rule, my understanding is, you know, there's the lawsuit going on, but if it doesn't end up going your way, is there something that Congress can do in its power to get rid of that, or any plans for that?
Congress has a tremendous amount of power that is going fully unused right now. So it's always hard to explain when people say, does Congress have something in its power? Of course, we're a co-equal branch. We have all the power going. We could say, if you deny us opportunities to walk into any federal facility unnoticed, we will not send one more dime out of the Treasury to fund your activities. But the Republicans control the House and the Senate, and so far have been unwilling to stand up to the president. But we have all kinds of power to do this. This should be a simple matter. We have added language. We had a big tiff about this last year over the post office, because we got mad that they were making us ask for 2 weeks' notice to go into post offices during a time when we were worried about the reorganization. And as you know, even here in Maine, we've had a lot of slowing down of mail and mail processing. And so we put language into the appropriations bill, very specifically, Republicans and Democrats voted on it, that said they had to allow us immediate access to post offices. And it wasn't even that controversial, and we won. So we can do that any day of the week. We could put that in the Homeland Security language that we're passing. We could put it in any language. We can pass a bill through the House tomorrow that would do that. This is just an unwillingness of the Republicans. Maybe they don't want to have the obligation to go in and see what needs to be seen, but they're not doing it.
Congresswoman, would you say then Republicans basically, they wouldn't sign on to themselves wanting to go see these detention centers?
I don't think most of them are going to see the detention centers, and they certainly have not been willing to advance any language that requires the federal government to let us in any day of the week.
I know that Wired has reported that there's gonna be an expansion of ICE present, like a facility of some kind in downtown Portland. What do you know about that, expansion, and any details that you've heard about that?
I don't know that we've heard any details, but we'll look into it right away. Absolutely. If we'd known, we would have asked him yesterday. I think we did ask them a few questions about any expansion they anticipated in Maine. And at that point, they didn't answer that, but sometimes you have to know the question to ask, like, oh, are you moving into, 36 Congress Street? I just made that name up.
The lawsuit, again, it only applies to those few members of Congress, right? The one that got ruled on to allow them to do facilities without 7 days notice, that's
Right.
correct, right?
Yeah.
And it's like Veronica Escobar and some of these other,
Yeah, we could get you a list, I can't remember off the top of my head, but some of them have been using that power that they have. But, I spoke to my colleagues about it last week, and as I said, they, have already gone back to court to expand it.
to everybody.
To everybody. And the hearing on that was last Thursday, so I was told we were expecting a new ruling by the end of this week. So we may see something soon.
And then, are you still hearing about, so there's been a few recent arrests, I think in Brunswick, Skowhegan, obviously had a border patrol case, and then I think Lewiston, there are still rumors of unmarked cars going around, so are you, especially
Yeah,
the
and what we've been
unmarked
trying to tell
car
people is that there is still ICE presence in Maine. There's still an office in Scarborough that is actively operating. Both CBP and ICE are operating in our state and continuing to use some of the expanded powers that this administration has given them. So yes, we followed up. Every time we hear about any activity, we generally try to find out from whatever sources. I mean, if the person doesn't contact us directly, whether it was Brunswick or Backyard Farms, just to find out more of the causes of what's going on and to follow what they're doing. So they are still here, and I don't think anybody should let their guard down. And my given the way this administration is, continuing with this idea of quotas and expansions of their immigration removal, detainment and removal policy, I think we'll just continue to see more.
And just to again summarize yesterday, it seems like you got the best picture possible, would you say, of this facility? If you had to summarize, like.
I think they attempted to give us the best picture of the facility possible. There's no way to walk into a facility like that and not find it dismal, bleak, and heartbreaking, because you know what happens here, and you know that people are here beginning this journey often of leaving this country, or at best of an extremely expensive, complicated attempt to get back home, and maybe do so without their paperwork, or without the level of comfort that they had once of, being on the pathway to becoming safe and secure in our country.
And so, we had 2 women there. How many ICE agents, officers were there, and how many other inmate or detainees were there? That count.
A couple people just come in for processing. There were 2 people who they said were, wasn't quite clear to me, but they were in prison guard, so
Yeah,
they,
so the people who were transferred from the other facilities like Stratford, Berlin, and they were undergoing some kind of processing at
we
Burlington.
saw a few people in there meeting with their lawyers, all Massachusetts.
So, the 2 women plus like 8 other detainees?
8 tops, yeah. Anything else?
Who went with you? Could you just clarify? Was it just the team or any
Yeah,
other, not other lawmakers?
No, we let the lawmakers in that district know, but one of the complications is you have to apply, you have to write your own letter of application 7 days in advance, and most of my Massachusetts colleagues have already visited there, so we were kind of there specifically to talk to the administrators, ask our own specific questions. If we go to Louisiana, we may try to find a few other members to go with us and do more of an organized trip, because I'm assuming a lot of people have colleagues there. But 3 people from my team. Thank you, everybody. If you got any other questions, these guys are experts, and I'm also happy to do any other follow-ups.
Thanks, everyone.
What's that?
What's going on up there?
Yeah,
I don't even know.
Okay. Okay. Rearrange.
Come on.